Hey everyone, before we dive in, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Drop a comment with where you're watching from and what time it is there. I love seeing how global our community is. Now, let's get started. I always thought camping was the safest kind of fear. You know exactly what is out there: trees, wind, animals that want nothing to do with you. But if you have ever sat by a fire and felt the dark between the trees watching you, really watching you, then you already know how wrong that feeling can be. That last night in the forest, when the air smelled like wet pine and something faintly metallic, I realized the woods were not just around us. They were listening to us. And they knew my name. It was me, Mark, and Lila at a tiny, almost empty campground near the edge of a national park. No signal, no nearby towns, just a dirt road and a ranger station we passed hours earlier. This trip was supposed to reset my brain after weeks of insomnia and a breakup that left me hollow. I kept telling myself that one quiet night under the stars would fix something inside me. By the time the sun set on our last night, I was too proud to admit that the moment the road disappeared in the rearview mirror, I already felt trapped. We were sitting around the fire when I heard it for the first time. My name, spoken in Mark's lazy, joking tone, drifting from the tree line behind my back. I turned, laughing, and saw his face across the fire, lips wrapped around the mouth of his beer bottle. He had not spoken. The night air was cold and damp, thick with the smell of wet bark and a strange metallic tang, like blood on a coin. Just inside the darkness, I noticed 3 small stacks of stones in a neat row and a tree with some kind of spiral eye symbol carved into it. I told myself it was just a ranger mark, something boring and official, but the lines looked too crude, too fresh. The fire burned lower as the hours slipped by. Mark kept trying to scare us, reminding us of all the creepy stories people post about camping gone wrong. He had a reputation for pranks, the kind that end with everyone laughing and annoyed. So when I heard my name again, this time in my own voice, repeating a joke I had told earlier that night, I stood up to prove to myself he had set up some speaker out there. The closer I walked to the trees, the stronger the smell of wet pine and metal became, like the forest was breathing against my face. My flashlight beam shook slightly as I swept it across the trunks. That was when I saw the same carved symbol further in, the lines still damp, as if they had just been cut, though I had heard no scraping. Behind me, Lila called my name, but her voice sounded too far away for how close she was. Things started changing in ways we could not explain. One of the little stone stacks that had been at the edge of the clearing now sat directly behind my tent. Another symbol had appeared on a closer tree, the cuts clean and wet. Mark swore on his life he was not doing it, and for the first time, he actually looked afraid. Then we heard Lila sobbing from deep in the woods, even though she was right beside me, clutching my arm so hard her nails dug into my skin. My flashlight flickered, and for a second, in the tree line, I saw our own silhouettes standing between the trunks, like copies waiting just inside the dark. When I checked my phone, the time had jumped almost an hour ahead, the battery suddenly at 10%. Sunrise was supposed to be around 5. It felt like the night was shrinking faster than it should. When the fear finally split us, it happened fast. Lila wanted to lock herself in the car. The remote would not unlock the doors, no matter how many times she pressed the button. My phone froze on the same minute. No signal, no emergency calls. The road we had driven down was swallowed in black, our lantern light just stopping at an invisible wall. We argued, voices hissing over the crackle of the dying fire, until another sound slid through the trees. Mark screaming for help, far inside the forest, even though he was standing right next to me. His face went white. "I didn't say that," he whispered. I believed him. I found the red herring when I followed that impossible echo toward the tree line. A cheap plastic voice changer hung from a low branch, tangled in fishing line, swaying gently. For a second, I almost laughed from relief. Of course, Mark had set this up earlier, and we had walked into it. But when I picked it up, cold mud crumbling off the casing, I saw the batteries inside were swollen and green with corrosion. It had not worked in years. I pressed the button anyway. Nothing. Above me, the whisper said my name again, perfectly, and lightly repeated something I had confessed by the fire. I wish I could disappear for a while. It was borrowing my own words to pull me in. The stacked stones had moved into a loose ring by then, curving around our tents and the fire. Another scream, Mark's voice, came from deep inside the dark. Not playful, not fake. I knew the ranger's warning from earlier that day. Stay on the marked trails after dark. The forest does not like lines being crossed. I knew I should stay put. But if that really was Mark, if he was out there bleeding or lost, how could I live with myself for doing nothing? I stepped over the nearest stack of stones. The decision felt like breaking the surface of water on the other side. The forest changed. The air dropped cold enough to hurt my teeth. The usual rustle of small animals and distant branches vanished. Every tree within my flashlight beam had the spiral I carved into it, all of them facing inward toward me. As I walked, the whispers multiplied, not just saying my name anymore, but repeating small things I had said on different nights of my life. Words whispered alone in my apartment. Things no one else had heard. My wish to disappear. My late-night complaints. My quiet, ugly thoughts. It had been listening long before this trip. Somewhere ahead of me, Mark called my name. Somewhere behind me, Mark called my name again. The same tone, the same rhythm, as if two copies were reading from the same script. My phone buzzed in my pocket. For a heartbeat, I thought the signal was back. The screen lit up to show the time, 4:59 a.m. I looked up. The sky was still black, no hint of sunrise. The metallic smell thickened until I tasted it. The whispers all combined into something that sounded almost like my own voice, begging myself to stay, to disappear into the trees where no one from my old life could reach me. It was not copying Mark at all. It was imitating the part of me that wanted to vanish, and it had been waiting for the moment I chose the forest over the road that I do not remember walking back. The next thing I knew, Lila was shaking me awake inside my tent, pale and shaking, saying she had found me curled up just outside the fire ring at dawn. Mark was gone. No footprints, no signs of a struggle, no stacked stones, no fresh carvings. The ranger told us people wander off all the time when they camp tired and stressed. That is the logical story. I wanted to believe it. Months later, back in my city apartment, I woke up around 5 in the morning to the smell of wet pine and cold metal drifting through the slightly open window. On the sill, someone had arranged 3 small stones in a neat little stack. And from the darkness just beyond the glass, a whisper used my voice to say my own name back to me. Camping always felt like safe fear to me. You hear coyotes, branches snapping, distant engines on the highway, but there are rules for all of that. Hang your food, lock your car, stay on the trail, zip the tent. Thin fabric feels like a wall when you are tired enough. I went out there alone to prove I could handle one night without anyone else. By sunset, the loop was almost quiet. A family with kids on one side of me, an older man with a faded camper on the other. At the gate, the ranger had said they locked it at 6 and opened it again at 6 in the morning, so if I stayed, I was there until dawn. That was the deal I made with myself. The old man waved me over while I was finishing my fire. His lantern hung from the awning, dented metal, thick glass panels that looked older than the camper itself. "You out here alone?" he asked, and when I nodded, he grinned. "If you hear a lantern outside your tent tonight, don't panic. Somebody likes to check on folks." I assumed he meant a ranger walking the sites, making sure idiots like me did not freeze or wander off. It fit the story in my head. Responsible people with warm light in their hands. Later, zipped into my sleeping bag, that pale yellow glow across the road made the woods feel almost friendly. I remember thinking that as long as I could see that light, I was not really alone. sometime after midnight. I woke to the same pale glow right outside my tent door. The air inside was cold, but the patch of fabric by my face felt warm and damp, as if someone had been breathing there for a long time. I lay perfectly still, listening, and heard the soft, careful zip of the door moving half an inch, then stopping. No footsteps in the gravel, no shadow bending the fabric, just that tiny movement of teeth sliding, testing. I whispered, "Hello." The lantern's glow shifted slightly, as if whoever held it leaned closer, but there was still no sound. When I fumbled for my flashlight, the light outside went out instantly, not fading, just gone, like someone had pinched the flame between their fingers. My phone said 1:12 a.m., one bar of service clinging to life. And I told myself it was just a ranger doing checks, because that was the only thing that let me close my eyes again the next time I woke. The glow was at the side of the tent, where there was no door, only fabric. The zipper sound still came from the front, sliding a little, stopping, sliding back. Inside, the damp patch had grown into an oval the size of a face, blurred at the edges like someone had pressed against the wall and breathed out slowly. I checked my phone again. It was after 3, even though it felt like I had only drifted off for minutes. Through the thin material, I could hear the kids from the family site no longer snoring, no rustle, no quiet talk. When I finally pulled the zipper up just enough to make a tiny gap and put my eye there, the lantern was standing inches away. Its yellow light was steady and unnaturally still, not flickering with the breeze at all. I saw the dented handle, the scratched glass, but no hand, no body, nothing casting a shadow. Across the loop, their tent stood open and dark, cooler tipped over, a camp chair on its side like someone had left in a hurry. As I watched, the lantern seemed to brighten as I breathed, almost like it was listening back. Then the zipper started to move by itself from the outside, tooth by tooth, crawling down toward the ground. My first instinct was to call the ranger. The second I unlocked my phone, the single bar dropped to no service, and the emergency call screen froze. I thought about bolting for the car, but the idea of turning my back on that light made my stomach twist. Either I stayed zipped in with something that knew the rhythm of my breathing, or I went out and found out what was holding the lantern. Warm, moist air pushed the fabric beside my ear inward in one long, deliberate exhale, and that was what broke me. I yanked the zipper the rest of the way down and stepped out into the cold. The campground felt hollow. No kid snores from the family site. No hum from the old camper's generator, just wind in the trees and my own heartbeat. The lantern stood upright in front of my tent with no hook, no stand, no hand. Its light as steady as a light bulb. When I touched the glass, it was cool. Inside, there was no wick and no fuel, just empty space shining. I backed toward my car, glancing at the family's table where their food and mugs still sat out. But their car was gone, and there were no fresh tire tracks in the damp dirt. When I looked back, the lantern was no longer in front of the tent. It stood beside my driver's door, close enough that it should have brushed my leg if it had walked there. I did not wait for sunrise. I threw my gear into the back seat, started the engine, and drove around the locked gate, bumping over the grass while my hands shook on the wheel. When the ranger station opened that morning, I stopped and asked if anyone did checks with lanterns at night. She frowned and shook her head. "We don't use lanterns," she said. "Only headlamps." And nobody was on duty after 10. When I mentioned the family, she wrote my site number down on a pad with a face that suddenly looked very tired. I went home convincing myself I had misread everything, that nerves and darkness had filled in the gaps. For a while, I almost believed it. A few weeks later, just before dawn, I woke up in my apartment to a faint yellow glow under my bedroom door. City light does not pull like that. It was the same still, heavy color I had watched through tent fabric. I sat up, holding my breath, staring at the crack. On this side of the door there was carpet and drywall, no canvas, no zipper, nothing to move. On the other side, Something dragged an invisible zipper pull slowly from one side of the door to the other. That same soft zizzip I had heard in the campground, stopping right where my head rested against the wall. Lakes at night are supposed to be calming. People pay extra for lakefront views without thinking about what it means to sleep beside a giant black mirror you cannot see the bottom of. If you have ever stood on a dock in the dark and felt the water shifting under you for no reason, like something was turning over down there, you already know that peace is a lie. That last night at the campground, with the mist crawling across the surface and something knocking under the boards, I learned the lake was not just reflecting us. It was paying attention. It was just me and my friend Evan on that trip. Evan is the kind of guy who chases storms for fun, who thinks nothing bad can happen as long as he gets the shot. He had this idea about a perfect sunrise in the mist photo, the kind you frame and hang in a cabin. When we checked in, the ranger pointed at the dam on the map and said not to be on the dock around 4 in the morning when they released water. Makes the currents weird. Unsafe, he said. On the bulletin board behind him, there was an old, sun-faded photo of the same lake, fog curling over it, and a little smudge near the shore that kind of looked like someone standing where no one should be. Evan just laughed and said, "If something comes out of that mist, we get famous or we die. Worth it." We set up the tent almost stupidly close to the shoreline, because he wanted to wake up and roll right onto the dock. A crooked, "No night swimming" sign had been nailed to a post near the beginning of the boards. The wood around the nails gouged like too many hands had grabbed it over the years. The lake was still when the sun went down, glassy and dark, but after midnight a low fog started to slide across the water, thin at first. Lying in my sleeping bag, I heard knocking under the dock, soft at first, like random slaps of water on wood. It took a while to realize it had fallen into a pattern. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 knocks. Over and over. Evan unzipped the tent, laughing, said he was going to record the sound, and walked toward the end of the dock. The tapping stopped the instant his boots hit the boards, leaving a silence that felt way too heavy. I watched his outline from the tent door for a while. The mist thickened unnaturally fast, swallowing the opposite shore, the campground lights, everything. At one point, I swear I saw his shape double for a second, like 2 copies overlapping. He called back that the water looked wrong, that the ripples were moving away from the shore instead of toward it, like the lake was breathing in. When I checked my phone, it said 2:15 a.m. I blinked, looked at Evan again, then glanced back down. 3:47. The battery had barely moved, but the time had jumped like I had fallen asleep standing up, except I knew I had not. Somewhere out in the white, the knocking started again, this time deeper under the dock, like knuckles on rotten wood. I stepped outside the tent and stayed on land, hugging my arms against the cold. The mist over the water had grown into pale vertical shapes, thicker patches that seemed to pace alongside where Evan stood. They were almost human height, but too smooth. No faces, just columns of whiteness drifting against the direction of the wind. His voice didn't sound like it was coming from the end of the dock anymore. It sounded like it was right next to me, at my shoulder, even though his silhouette was still out there. My skin prickled, and when I took a step back from the waterline, something icy and slimy wrapped around my bare ankle from below, squeezing just long enough for me to feel individual fingers before letting go. When I jerked away, a wet, muddy handprint remained on my skin, colder than the air, like the lake had reached up and tried me on. Every tent around us was quiet. No soft snores, no zippers, no car doors, just fog-wrapped shapes of vehicles and the faint glint of metal. I grabbed my phone to call for help, but the signal bar was gone and the clock app froze when I tried to set an alarm, numbers refusing to move. My keys were in Evan's jacket, which he had taken with him. If he stayed on that dock, if he slipped or got dragged, I was stuck here until the dam release started, and probably after. I tried to tell myself it was just pressure changes from the dam, like those articles about lakes sloshing and making docks knock. Normal science. Normal fear. Then my screen buzzed with a photo from Evan. It was a low-res preview of the lake, mist all around, and his figure at the end of the dock. Standing beside him was a second shape, shorter, turned slightly toward the camera. But in the picture, Evan was facing the shore, camera in his hands, while that other figure faced the same way I was, like it was standing right next to me. The taps under the dock came back, much louder now, directly under his boots. 3. Pause. 3. Pause. Like someone knocking from under the boards to be let in. Evan shouted that something was touching his feet through the gaps, voice cracking between thrill and fear. I had a choice: stay on the shore and hope he came back, or walk out into that white nothing and drag him by force, ignoring the ranger's warning and every instinct screaming for me to stay off the water. I stepped onto the dock. The boards creaked like they were surprised. With each step, the shore behind me faded into a wall of gray. The dock felt longer than it had earlier, stretching out under my feet with no clear end. Mist clung to my jeans, cold and smelling like algae and metal. Beneath the surface, shadows moved in slow circles that did not match my flashlight or the dim stars. In flashes between gusts, I thought I saw faces just under the waterline, eyes open, hair floating. Evan was only a darker blur at the far edge now, but his voice whispered right at my ear, urging me to hurry, to come just a little further. I looked down. The no night swimming sign was no longer by the post on shore. It sat several feet below, bolted to something underwater, letters warped by the moving surface. The water level seemed higher than it had been when we set up camp, licking the bottoms of the boards. That was when something clamped around my ankle, far stronger this time, yanking my leg toward the gap between two planks. The cold of it burned, thick slime squeezing my skin as if it wanted to pull me down into the black. I grabbed the nearest support post and held on while the knocking turned into full pounding beneath me. Like fists from inside a coffin, that I remember the taste of the water when it finally pulled me under for a second. Bitter and metallic, mist swirling even down there. Pale shapes brushing past my eyes. Then nothing that I awoke on the rocky shore at a washed-out gray dawn, coughing lake water out of my lungs. My clothes were soaked, my ankle ringed with dark finger-shaped bruises. The tent was behind me, twisted but upright. The dock sat quiet, empty. Evan was gone. His camera bumped softly against the boards, lens cracked, still attached to the strap hooked on a nail. The ranger said he must have slipped and gone under, that sometimes they never find bodies when the dam churns the water. That is the clean story. Weeks later, back home, I was taking a hot shower, trying not to think about it. Steam thickened on the bathroom mirror, fogging the glass into a white blur. As I watched, a pale vertical shape formed in the reflection behind me, a human-sized smudge that did not move when I did. Then, from under the completely dry bathtub, 3 slow, hollow knocks sounded, a pause, and 3 more, the exact same rhythm the lake had used when it first called us out onto the dock. Now, for the last story tonight, I want you to picture something simple. You, your friends, and a quiet campground at night. You feel safe because other people are nearby. Their fire, their laughter, their lantern light. It all makes the dark feel less personal. But what if you realized, slowly, that the campsite across from you was not full of people at all, and that the only truly empty seat was the one facing you? I was on that trip with my friends Mia and Jordan, just a normal weekend away. We booked a site on a loop where the pads face each other across a little gravel road, 2 by 2. When we checked in, the ranger mentioned storms rolling in after 3 in the morning. If it hits early, we might close the loop road, he said. Some folks just leave their setups and never come back to claim them. I thought he meant people going home early and forgetting gear. I had no idea he meant it literally. Our spot faced another site that should have felt comforting. There were 2 dome tents set up, a cooler by the picnic table, a lantern hanging from a metal hook, and 4 camp chairs around a blackened fire ring. We could hear laughter drifting over sometimes, but no words. Every time I glanced up, their faces were lost in shadow, even though their lantern burned steady. I am the anxious friend, the one who notices small weird things and kills the vibe, so I kept quiet. It was our last night, and I was not going to be the reason we packed up early. We got our own fire going and sat around it, trading stories. At some point, smoke shifted and drifted sideways toward the opposite campsite and back. For a second, the smell changed. Under the normal wood scent, there was this sharp hint of burnt hair and melted plastic, like someone had thrown the wrong thing into their fire. When I looked up, the 4th chair on their side, the one with no one in it, was turned a little more toward us than before, angled directly at our flames. I did not remember it being that way when we first sat down. A shape in one of the chairs lifted an arm in what looked like a slow wave, but the hand and face never caught the glow. It was like the light slid off them. Mia stiffened beside me. "Did you see that?" she whispered. "Someone's behind their tent." Jordan and I both looked. Behind the tents, nothing. But all 4 chairs cast clear shadows where bodies should be sitting, long and human-shaped across the dirt. Thunder rolled farther off, and when I checked my phone, the time had jumped ahead almost 20 minutes since the last time I looked, even though it felt like only a few minutes had passed. The laughter from across the loop cut off mid-breath, not fading, just ending like someone had muted them. We kept trying to explain it. Maybe they had gone for a short walk. Maybe the lantern was on a timer. But the longer we sat, the stranger it felt. Our fire shrank even as we added wood, while their lantern across the way slowly brightened. Jordan cupped his hands around his mouth and called out, "Nice night for a storm, huh?" A voice answered from the opposite side in Mia's exact tone. Same pitch, same tiny nervous laugh at the end, even though she was still beside me, staring at the fire. For a heartbeat, the 3 of us stared across and saw 3 shapes arranged just like us on their side, sitting in the same positions, one extra empty seat facing where I sat. Then our flames snapped, sending sparks up, and the shapes blurred. The wind picked up, and the other camps farther down the loop started shutting down. Cars' doors thumped, RV blinds snapped shut, porch lights clicked off until it felt like just the 2 facing sites were still awake. The ranger's truck never came by. Our phones lost signal, the weather app glitching when I tried to open the radar. Mia and Jordan gave up around midnight and went to the tent, leaving me alone with the coals and that steady, watching lantern. The 4th chair across the road had turned even more, aimed exactly at my log like someone had scooted forward to get a better view. I kept telling myself it was nothing. Maybe they had gone on a night hike. Maybe they were inside their tents. Maybe I was tired. To prove it to myself, I finally stood up. Thunder rumbled closer, and heat lightning flickered behind the trees, but the road between our sites was only a few steps of gravel. Crossing it felt bigger than that, like stepping into someone else's room without knocking. I told myself I would just say hi, maybe borrow some kindling, confirm that they were real, breathing people, and come back. I walked across. Up close, everything was worse. The fire in their ring was there, but wrong. The logs were black, frozen mid-burn, edges glowing faintly, but giving off almost no heat. When I reached a hand toward the flame, I could not feel warmth until my skin was nearly in it. The lantern glass was hot, almost painful, but when I looked inside, there was no mantle, no bulb, no fuel canister. Just a bright filament hanging in empty air, burning on nothing. All 4 chairs were perfectly spaced, identical cheap fold-ups. The 4th one angled directly at the spot where my own log was back at my fire. I touched the fabric of one seat. It was warm, like someone had just gotten up. Behind me, our sight felt farther away than it should, the glow of our coals dim and distant. For a second, I had the sickening impression that if I turned around completely, I would see our campsite empty too, with 3 warm chairs and 1 missing person. The cooler by their table had a name written in faded marker, half scraped off, but I recognized the first letters. Later, I would see the same name on a missing person flyer in a gas station on the drive home, his face staring out from under a headline about no remains found. In that moment, lightning flashed almost directly overhead, filling the loop with white light. For that fraction of a second, I saw the truth. There were no tents, no people, just bare ground, blackened ring, chairs, cooler, lantern, like a display in a store pulled out of time. But in the reflection on the metal lip of the cooler, I saw us. Me, Mia, and Jordan, sitting around our own fire on the other side. Our faces hollowed out, eyes too dark, with one extra empty shape beside me. A space, waiting at the far edge of the circle. Thunder cracked right on top of us, and the first heavy drops of rain slammed down, knocking ash into my eyes. I stumbled backwards, tripped over the lip of their fire ring, and bolted for our tent. By the time I zipped myself inside, the storm was roaring, rain pounding so hard that I could not hear if anyone moved outside. In the morning, after the storm cleared, the gravel across from us was just dirt. No fire ring, no lantern hook, no packed down footprints where tents had been. Just an empty, unassigned patch with wild grass bending in the breeze. When I asked the ranger who had been in that site, he frowned at his clipboard and said that spot was closed for maintenance. Nobody's booked there, he said. Hasn't been for a while. Weeks later, back in the city, I went to a backyard barbecue at a friend's house. Normal night, fairy lights, cheap plastic chairs, the smell of charcoal. When I stepped onto the grass, my stomach dropped. For chairs, same brand, same colors, same cooler on the same side. 3 people sitting, laughing, facing the fire pit. One empty seat angled off to the side, turned just enough that it pointed straight at me, as if somebody had gotten up and was just about to come back, or as if it had been waiting for me to finally sit down. And that's where we'll leave the fire tonight. For nights, for campsites, and for reminders that the woods do not have to bleed to be dangerous. Sometimes it is a whisper that sounds exactly like you. Sometimes it is a lantern with no one holding it. Sometimes it is water that knocks back. And sometimes the scariest thing is an empty chair that never quite faces the right way. If you made it all the way to the end, you are braver than most campers I know. Tell me in the comments which story got under your skin the most, or if you've ever had something strange happen on a trip that you still cannot explain. Maybe next time, I'll be telling your story here. For now, check your doors, close your curtains, and try not to think about stacked stones, pale mist, or lantern light under your bedroom door. Sleep well, if the woods let you.